observation deck of the Vexarath hummed with quiet power, suspended in perfect orbit above the vibrant blue-green sphere the locals called Earth. Captain Zorath reclined on his command dais, his 6 multifaceted eyes reflecting the holographic glow of the planet below. The Krixari Dominion had crushed 1,000 civilizations, and this one had fallen faster than most. Their pathetic orbital defenses had lasted less than an hour. Their armies had crumbled in days. Now, the real entertainment could begin. Primitive biomass, Second Commander Visk hissed, his mandibles clicking with dark amusement. His armored exoskeleton gleamed under the crimson lights. Their tallest structures barely scrape the clouds. Their weapons rely on chemical explosions. A stiff breeze could kill half of them through infection alone, and yet they dared to resist. Zorath let out a low, chittering laugh that echoed across the deck. Resistance makes the hunt sweeter. The nobility grows bored with easy prey. Today we give them sport worthy of the Dominion. On the colossal central holodisplay, the vast hunting preserve stretched out in perfect detail. The Krixari had reshaped what was once the heart of North America into a 1,000-kilometer arena of dense forests, shattered cities, winding rivers, and open killing fields. Perfect terrain for predators. Thousands of humans, survivors rounded up from the final pockets of resistance, stood in ragged lines behind massive reinforced gates. Men, women, teenagers. No distinction. All prey. "Open the gates," Zorath commanded, his voice dripping with anticipation. "Release the first wave. Let them run." Deep in the preserve, hydraulic clamps hissed open like the breath of some ancient monster. Massive metal gates slammed upward with ground-shaking force. For a moment, the humans stood frozen under the harsh alien floodlights. Then they moved. Not in the blind, screaming panic the Krixari had come to expect from lesser species. These humans moved with eerie purpose. Small groups split off instantly, vanishing into tree lines, ruined buildings, and tall grass with practiced coordination. No mass stampede. No chaos. Sergeant Marcus Hale crouched low behind a collapsed concrete overpass just minutes after the gates opened, his heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. 28 years old, former Army Ranger, now leader of a squad forged in the fires of 3 years of brutal occupation. 12 people. No guns yet. But they had something far more dangerous. Months of planning whispered in secret, memorized maps and unbreakable will. "Phase 1, he whispered into the crude throat microphone they had smuggled past the guards. "Run hard, draw them deep, stay loose, make them think we're broken." His people nodded once and scattered into the fading light. Marcus took one last look at the alien sky before sprinting into the tree line, boots pounding over broken asphalt and earth. Miles away, in the thick pine forests of what used to be Colorado, Lena Reyes ran with her own group of 8. Her lungs already burned, legs pumping with desperate speed. 24, former engineering student turned resistance fighter. A fresh scar ran down her left cheek from the day Chicago fell. She glanced over her shoulder and spotted the first hunter drone dropping from the canopy. A sleek, 6-limbed killing machine the size of a grizzly bear, its red sensors glowing hungrily. Lena's lips peeled back in a grim, defiant smile. "Come on then," she breathed. "Chase us." High above on the Vexarath, the assembled Krixari nobility lounged in luxurious viewing galleries, sipping sweet nectar wine and placing enormous bets. 1,000,000,000,000 credits rode on how quickly the first human would fall. 40 seconds, one lord chittered, waving a clawed hand. 20, another countered with glee. The first hunter drones streaked toward the prey. The Krixari observers leaned forward, mandibles parted in excitement. Any second now the screaming would begin. The glorious footage of tearing flesh and spraying blood would fill the highlight reels across the Dominion. But the screams never came. The humans kept running. Fast, deliberate, splitting and regrouping in patterns that made no tactical sense to a species that had never encountered true coordinated persistence hunting. Small teams darted through ruins, using cover with unnatural efficiency. Some even doubled back briefly, leaving false trails before vanishing again. Zorath's multifaceted eyes narrowed slightly. They run well for primitives, unusual discipline. Visk checked the data streams. Merely adrenaline and fear, Captain. They will tire soon. All prey does. But something felt deeply wrong. On the ground, Marcus's squad reached their first waypoint, a dried riverbed hidden by overgrown foliage. They didn't stop to rest. They kept pushing, hearts hammering, sweat pouring despite the cooling evening air. Every step was calculated. Every turn memorized from smuggled maps and painful reconnaissance missions conducted while the Krixari grew complacent. "Drone on R6, one of his people hissed. "Keep moving, don't engage yet," Marcus ordered. "Tire it, make it waste power." The hunter drone crashed through the trees behind them, its metal limbs tearing branches. Its targeting lasers swept the area. For a terrifying second, Marcus felt the red dot dance across his back. He zigzagged hard, using every bit of training he possessed. The drone lunged, only to overshoot as the squad split perfectly around a cluster of boulders. The machine paused, recalculating, its power cells already working harder than anticipated. In orbit, the first faint itch of unease crept into Zorath's mind when the initial hunter drone's signal flickered and died without recording a single confirmed kill. No blood, no body, just silence. "Technical malfunction," Visk said quickly, though his mandibles clicked with nervous tension. Then a second drone vanished from the network. Then a third. The betting galleries had gone strangely quiet. The nobility watched with growing confusion as human groups led the remaining drones on long, arcing pursuits through dense terrain, forcing the machines to expend energy on difficult climbs and dead-end chases. "They are still running," Zorath murmured, rising from his dais. His chitin plates tightened uncomfortably against his body. "Why does this feel wrong?" Because these humans weren't fleeing in terror. They were running with purpose, drawing the hunters deeper into the preserve, mapping their capabilities, testing their limits, positioning themselves across the massive arena the Krixari themselves had provided. Lena's group burst from the tree line into an old suburban ruin, the drone close on their heels. She could hear its mechanical snarl growing louder. Her legs screamed. Fear clawed at her throat, but she kept running, leading it exactly where they needed it to go. "Keep it chasing," she shouted to her team. "We own this ground now." Back on the command deck, Captain Zorath stared at the holodisplay as more drones began reporting anomalies. The humans had been released less than 40 minutes ago, yet the hunt already felt off balance. Visk stepped closer, voice low. "Shall we deploy additional units, Captain?" Zorath's mandibles clicked slowly. "Not yet. Let them run. Let the nobles enjoy the show a little longer." But deep in his alien mind, the first seed of doubt had been planted. These humans were not behaving like any prey he had ever seen. They ran like predators preparing for war. And the Krixari had just given them an entire continent to do it in. The first hour dragged across the Vexarath like a blade against chitin. What should have been a slaughter had become an unsettling silence. The massive holodisplays showed thousands of humans still moving through the preserve, but the kill counters remained frozen at 0. No glorious deaths. No blood-soaked highlights for the Dominion broadcasts. In the luxury galleries, the nobility had gone quiet. Betting pools that once buzzed with trillions of credits now sat stagnant. Empty nectar wine goblets littered the tables. Several high lords had stopped watching altogether, murmuring in low, uneasy clicks. Captain Zorath paced slowly before the central display, his 6 eyes narrowed to slits. "This is impossible. They should be broken by now, panicked, dying." Second Commander Visk hunched over the tactical feeds, mandibles twitching with frustration. "The hunter drones are being led in inefficient patterns, Captain. The biomass is using the terrain against them. Dense cover, elevation changes, narrow ravines. But they will tire. They always do." Zorath slammed a clawed fist onto the railing. "They are prey. Act like it." He turned sharply. "Enough games. Release the biohunters. Bring living predators. Let them taste real fear and spill real blood." Deep beneath the preserve, massive holding pens rumbled open. From conquered death worlds across the Dominion came nightmares given form. 6-legged rippers the size of tanks, their saliva sizzling with corrosive acid. Flying shriekers with razor wings and sonar that could burst eardrums. Burrowing horrors with dozens of tentacles that could drag victims screaming into the earth. The ground trembled as the monsters were unleashed. On the surface, Sergeant Marcus Hale and his squad pushed through the thickening underbrush, legs burning, lungs raw. They had covered nearly 12 kilometers without stopping. Behind them, the mechanical whine of a damaged hunter drone grew fainter, but new roars now echoed through the trees, deeper, wetter, more primal. "Contact," one of his men hissed. A ripper exploded from the foliage, its armored plates glistening, acid dripping in steaming ropes. 6 humans scattered in perfect synchronization, exactly as they had drilled in secret for months. 2 drew it left with shouts and thrown rocks. 2 more peeled right. Marcus and the final pair waited in the shadows of a collapsed overpass. The beast charged the bait. A hidden tripwire snapped. A precariously balanced shelf of concrete and rebar, prepared weeks earlier, crashed down with crushing force, pinning one massive leg. The ripper screamed, a sound like tearing metal mixed with wet gurgling. "Now," Marcus roared. Molotov cocktails, crafted from scavenged bottles, gasoline, and chemicals hidden since the occupation, sailed through the air. Fire bloomed across the creature's carapace. It thrashed violently, acid spraying wildly and burning one fighter's arm. The man bit back a scream and kept fighting. Marcus drove a sharpened rebar spear into the ripper's softer underjaw with all his strength. The squad swarmed it in a frenzy of primal rage and cold calculation. It wasn't elegant. It was brutal, ugly, and desperate, but it worked. They stripped useful chitin plates and acid glands from the corpse in under 90 seconds, then kept running. Miles away, Lena Reyes sprinted through the darkening pine forest with her group, 3 shriekers now circling overhead, their piercing cries rattling bones. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Every breath tasted of blood and fear. "Substation ahead," she shouted, voice hoarse, "just like we planned." They had memorized every inch of this sector during the long, hopeless months of captivity. The old power substation, half buried in rubble, was their killing field. As the shriekers dove with wings slicing the air, the humans triggered their trap. A makeshift generator, repaired with stolen parts and pure defiance, roared to life. Ancient transformers overloaded in a spectacular burst of blue-white lightning. 2 shriekers plummeted from the sky, bodies smoking and twitching. The third landed hard, wounded but still deadly. Lena didn't hesitate. She charged with a rebar spear gripped in white-knuckled hands. "This is for Chicago," she screamed, driving the point deep into its sensory cluster. The creature's death throes nearly took her head off, but she rolled away at the last second, covered in alien ichor. Back in orbit, the command deck had descended into tense chaos. New casualty reports flooded in, biohunters dying faster than expected. The nobility's silence had turned to angry chittering. "They are using tools," one lord snarled from the gallery. "Primitive but coordinated." Visk tried to maintain control. "All prey eventually uses tools, my lord. It changes nothing. It changes everything," Zoreth cut him off, voice low and dangerous. "Increase drone deployment. Flood the preserve with non-lethal gas. Sonic emitters at full power. Drive them into the open like the animals they are." Visk hesitated only a moment before obeying. Canisters dropped from low-altitude drones across the preserve. Thick, stinging tear gas billowed through forests and ruins. High-frequency sonic emitters began pulsing, designed to induce panic and disorientation. On the ground, the air turned thick and vicious. Eyes burned. Lungs screamed. Several humans collapsed, vomiting. Marcus tied a wet rag over his face, eyes watering so badly he could barely see. "Stay together," he ordered, voice muffled. "Drag the fallen, we knew this was coming, push through it." His squad obeyed without question, pulling their comrades along as they continued their grueling run. Some coughed blood. None stopped. Lena's team did the same, rags pressed to faces, guiding each other through the choking fog. The gas was meant to break them. Instead, it only sharpened their hatred. "They're panicking up there," Marcus growled to his second as they crested a ridge under cover of smoke. "That means we're winning round 1. Phase 2 begins at dawn. We link up with the others. We hit them where it hurts." High above, Captain Zoreth stared at the displays with growing dread. The humans were no longer scattered individuals fleeing for their lives. Small groups had begun signaling each other. Smoke patterns, mirror flashes, rhythmic tapping carried through the ground itself. They were forming something larger, something dangerous. The preserve, designed as their hunting ground, was slowly transforming into a battlefield. And the humans kept running, not away from death, but toward it on their own terms. Zoreth's mandibles clicked nervously. For the first time in his long career of conquests, the predator felt the faintest shadow of unease. These humans were adapting too fast. And the night was only just beginning. Dawn bled across the preserve like an open wound. Crimson light spilled over shattered mountains and ruined cities, illuminating the carnage of the first night. Smoke curled from a dozen fires where biohunters had met their end. The air still carried the acrid bite of tear gas and the metallic tang of alien blood. Aboard the Vexarath, Captain Zoreth stood rigid before the tactical holodisplay, his chitin plates locked tight with barely contained fury. The casualty reports painted a nightmare he refused to accept. Over 70 hunter drones destroyed or disabled, 23 biohunters slain, and not a single major human group eradicated. "Impossible," he hissed. "They are primitives surviving on scavenged garbage." Second Commander Visk's mandibles clicked rapidly. "They are adapting at an unprecedented rate, Captain. They are using our own terrain against us. The nobility is demanding action." Zoreth turned to the luxury galleries where the once boisterous lords now watched in stony silence. "Then we give them action. Deploy every ground asset. Full warrior squads and exosuits. Flood the preserve with our forces. I want these humans crushed before midday." Thousands of Krixari dropships descended like a swarm of angry hornets. Armored warriors in heavy-powered exosuits landed in formation, energy lances glowing. Drone swarms darkened the sky. The preserve, once a hunting arena, was now a full-scale war zone. On the ground, Sergeant Marcus Hale crouched on a forested ridge overlooking a major Krixari forward base built on the bones of Colorado Springs. Nearly 200 humans had linked up with his group during the night, exhausted, bloodied, but unbroken. Lena Reyes stood beside him, her face streaked with soot and dried ichor, eyes burning with fierce determination. "They think we're still running scared," Marcus whispered, studying the base through scavenged binoculars. "Good, let them believe it." The Krixari base was formidable. Energy barriers, automated turrets, and squads of elite warriors patrolling with arrogant confidence. Their exosuits made them walking tanks. But Marcus and his people had spent months memorizing every landing site, every weak point, every patrol pattern during the long humiliation of captivity. Lena checked her makeshift satchel charge. "Eastern drone relay is down thanks to my team. They're blind in Sector 7. We hit them there." Marcus nodded. "Faint hard, make it look desperate, draw them out. Phase 2 starts now." The attack began at dusk. Humans poured from the tree line in what looked like a chaotic, suicidal wave. They screamed, threw Molotovs, and fired stolen weapons in ragged bursts. It was pure theater, designed to look like broken prey making one final stand. Krixari warriors took the bait. Exosuits thundered forward, energy lances carving bright lines through the twilight. Dozens of humans fell in the opening moments, their bodies vaporized or torn apart. Screams, very real screams, echoed across the field. But the survivors kept coming, darting between cover, dragging wounded, refusing to break. "Push them," a Krixari squad leader roared in translated galactic standard. "Drive the biomass into the open." The aliens pursued exactly as Marcus had predicted, straight into carefully prepared kill zones. A warrior stepped on a pressure plate hidden under debris. Old mining explosives, painstakingly scavenged and repurposed, detonated with a thunderous boom. The blast shredded 3 exosuits into twisted metal and shattered chitin. Alien screams, high-pitched and horrifying, ripped through the night. Marcus's voice crackled over the throat mics. Hit and fade, don't let them regroup. Lena led a splinter team through the smoke, planting charges on fuel depots. The explosions lit up the sky in orange fireballs. Crixari warriors turned to pursue her group, only to find themselves funneled into narrow streets where tripwires and falling rubble waited. One massive warrior cornered Lena against a half-collapsed wall. Its energy lance powered up with a deadly whine. Time slowed. She could see her reflection in its visor, small, bloodied, but smiling. A rebar spear thrown by one of her teammates slammed into the suit's neck joint. Lena dove forward, jamming a satchel charge into the gap and rolling away as the warrior staggered. The detonation tore it apart from the inside. She kept running. In orbit, the command deck trembled with tension. Zorath watched the casualty counters climbing steadily. The nobility had fallen completely silent. Several had quietly slipped toward the escape pods. "These are not random attacks," Visk warned, voice tight. "They are coordinated. They are learning our tactics in real time." Zorath's eyes blazed with rage and the first traces of fear. "Then we end this. Deploy the harvester. Release the big one." The order went out. From the belly of a heavy cruiser, the harvester dropped, an apocalyptic biomechanical nightmare the size of a skyscraper. Tentacles thicker than redwood trees whipped the air. Acid sprayers hissed. Sensory arrays swept the battlefield like searchlights from hell. It landed with an earthquake roar that shook the entire preserve. Its deafening challenge scream rolled across the land for kilometers. Human runners froze for a heartbeat, then kept moving. But now every path curved inward, toward the monster. Marcus wiped blood from his eyes as his enlarged force sprinted across open ground, deliberately drawing the harvester's attention. Tentacles slammed down behind them, crushing trees and humans alike. Acid rain burned the earth. "Keep it chasing," Marcus shouted, voice raw. "Don't let it stop. We only get one shot at this." The monster pursued with relentless fury, smashing through forests and ruins. It snatched several runners, their brief screams lost in the chaos. But the main force stayed just ahead, bleeding distance, sacrificing lives to lead the beast exactly where they needed it. Toward the main planetary shield generator complex, anchored on the ruins of Colorado Springs. Lena and a small elite team of engineers had already slipped away during the chaos, crawling through a forgotten drainage culvert they had mapped months earlier. They carried the most precious weapon humanity still possessed, a crude but powerful nuclear device assembled from stolen fissile material and desperate ingenuity. Every step through the dark, cramped tunnel was torture. Distant booms and the harvester's roars vibrated through the concrete above them. "We're under the perimeter," Lena whispered, voice shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. "Planting now." They worked in frantic silence, hands trembling as they set the device at the base of the primary emitter tower. The timer began its deadly countdown. 6 minutes, Lena said. "We run now." They sprinted back through the culvert as the harvester reached the outer defenses of the shield generator base. In its rage, the monster began attacking everything, human and Crixari alike. Alien warriors screamed as their own creation turned on them, tentacles crushing exosuits like tin cans. Marcus watched from a distant ridge, chest heaving. "Everybody down, cover your eyes." The explosion, when it came, was biblical. A blinding white flash lit up the night sky. The shield generator complex vanished in a towering mushroom cloud. The planetary defense shield flickered once across the entire planet and died. Alarms howled across the Vexarath. "Shield failure," Visk shrieked. "The fleet is completely exposed." Zorath stared in frozen horror as thousands of humans, across every sector, stopped running away and began charging toward every Crixari landing craft and dropship they could reach. They weren't fleeing anymore. They were coming for their hunters. The harvester was gaining. Its colossal footsteps shook the earth like an approaching apocalypse. Each thunderous impact sent shockwaves rippling through the ruined landscape. Thick tentacles thicker than ancient redwoods whipped wildly, smashing through forests and concrete ruins alike. From its gaping maw, corrosive acid rained in hissing sheets, melting everything it touched into bubbling slag. Sergeant Marcus Hale's lungs were on fire. Every breath felt like knives slicing through his chest. His legs screamed in agony, muscles pushed far beyond their limits, yet he kept running at the front of the desperate column. Behind him, hundreds of humans sprinted across the open killing fields toward the one target the Crixari never imagined they would dare approach. "Keep it chasing us," Marcus roared into his throat mic, voice raw and breaking. "Stay just ahead, sacrifice nothing unless you have to." A tentacle slammed down mere meters behind him, pulverizing 3 runners into red mist. Their screams were brief and horrifying. Marcus didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. Every death bought precious seconds for the rest. High above in orbit, Captain Zoreth gripped the railing of the command dais so tightly his claws cracked the metal. His 6 multifaceted eyes were wide with disbelief as he watched the unfolding catastrophe on the main holodisplay. "They are running straight into our strongest defensive position," he hissed. "Are these humans suicidal? Have they finally broken?" Second Commander Visk's mandibles trembled. "Or, they know something we don't, Captain. Their movements are too coordinated, too deliberate." The massive shield generator complex rose ahead like a fortress of steel and glowing alien crystal, built atop the shattered remains of Colorado Springs. Energy barriers hummed with lethal power. Turrets swiveled. Hundreds of elite Crixari warriors in full exosuits stood ready. The humans charged anyway. Crixari defenders opened fire without mercy. Bright violet lances of energy carved through the night, vaporizing dozens in the first wave. The air filled with the sickening smell of burnt flesh and ozone. Bodies fell by the score. Yet the survivors kept coming, screaming, bleeding, throwing themselves forward with terrifying resolve. They looked like a last, desperate, insane assault by cornered prey. It was the perfect distraction. While the main force drew every gun, every sensor, and every eye, Lena Reyes and her 6-person engineering team crawled through a narrow, pitch-black drainage culvert they had mapped and prepared months earlier. Mud and filth caked their bodies. Their hearts hammered so violently they could feel it in their throats. Behind them, the roar of battle and the harvester's earth-shaking steps vibrated through the concrete. "Faster," Lena whispered urgently, her voice barely audible. "We're under the outer perimeter." The crude nuclear device they dragged between them, a nightmare of stolen fissile material, reactor components, and desperate human ingenuity, scraped against the tunnel floor. One wrong move and it could detonate early, killing them all. Sweat stung Lena's eyes. Her hands shook as they finally reached the base of the primary emitter tower. The massive structure hummed with enough power to shield an entire planet from orbital bombardment. "Plant it here," she ordered, voice tight with tension, "right against the main coolant junction." They worked in frantic silence, fingers flying despite exhaustion and fear. Every second stretched into an eternity. Distant explosions rocked the tunnel walls, showering them with dust. One engineer's hand slipped, nearly dropping a critical connector. Lena caught it just in time, shooting him a fierce look. "Timer set," she finally whispered, her voice cracking. 6 minutes, we run now." They turned and sprinted back through the cramped darkness, scraping elbows and knees raw in their desperation to escape the blast radius. Above ground, the harvester had arrived. Drawn by the massive concentration of chaos and movement, the biomechanical monster tore into the shield generator's outer defenses with indiscriminate fury. Its tentacles ripped through Crixari exosuits like paper, acid-dissolving armor and flesh alike. Alien warriors screamed in high-pitched terror as their own creation turned on them. "Control it," a Crixari commander shrieked over comms. "Bring it back under." His transmission cut off in a wet crunch. From a distant ridge, Marcus watched the timer ticking down in his head, chest heaving. "Everybody down! Cover your eyes and ears! Get behind cover!" The surviving humans threw themselves into ditches, behind rubble, anywhere they could find shelter. The explosion was biblical. A blinding white flash lit up the entire night sky, brighter than the sun. The shockwave rolled outward like a physical hammer, flattening trees for kilometers. The shield generator complex vanished in a towering, hellish mushroom cloud of fire, smoke, and radioactive fury. Secondary explosions rippled across the base as power conduits and munitions cooked off. Aboard the Vexarath, alarms howled in a deafening cacophony. "Planetary shield failure," Visk shrieked, his voice cracking with panic. "All sectors reporting breach. The fleet is completely exposed." Zoreth staggered backward, mandibles hanging open in frozen horror. For the first time in his long career of conquest, the Predator felt true terror. On every display, thousands of humans, emerging from every sector of the massive preserve, stopped running away from Krixari forces. Instead, they began charging toward them. Toward every landing craft, every dropship, every grounded vessel they could reach. They weren't fleeing anymore. They were boarding. Marcus stood tall on the ridge as flames from the destroyed generator painted the sky orange and red. His face, streaked with blood and dirt, was set in grim triumph. "Phase 3, he growled into the comms. "Take their ships, turn their weapons against them. Humanity doesn't run forever." Lena's team burst from the culvert just in time, collapsing beside the main force. She looked up at the burning sky, exhausted but fierce. The hunters had become the hunted, and the real counterattack had only just begun. Chaos erupted across the Krixari fleet, like a supernova of rebellion. The moment the planetary shield collapsed in that blinding nuclear fireball, every hidden human resistance cell across Earth awoke with vengeful fury. Years of preparation exploded into action. Old ICBM silos, painstakingly repaired in secret, launched jury-rigged missiles skyward. Swarms of makeshift drones, built from scavenged consumer electronics and smuggled alien tech, rose from hidden bunkers beneath ruined cities. Commercial airliners, loaded with explosives and piloted by volunteers who knew they wouldn't return, climbed toward low-orbit targets. Aboard the flagship Vexarath, Captain Zoreth gripped the command rail as alarms screamed in a deafening symphony. Red emergency lights bathed the deck in blood-like crimson. "Status," he roared. Second Commander Visk staggered forward, ichor leaking from a cracked segment in his carapace. "Multiple boarding actions across the fleet. They're using our own dropships against us. Entire cruisers are going dark and then opening fire on friendly vessels." On the massive holodisplay, Zoreth watched in growing horror as the impossible unfolded. Human fighters, piloted by men and women who had never flown alien craft hours earlier, screamed through the Krixari formation with reckless, brilliant aggression. They flew like they had nothing left to lose, because for years, they truly hadn't. "How is this happening?" Zoreth bellowed, his mandibles clacking wildly. "They were prey, they were running, scattered biomass fleeing through a hunting preserve." Visk's voice trembled. "They were never scattered, Captain. Every kilometer they ran, every drone they lured, every beast they killed, it was preparation. They were mapping our technology, studying our tactics, smuggling tools and codes. The preserve wasn't our arena, it was theirs." Deep in the bowels of the Vexarath, the nightmare had already reached the command ship. Sergeant Marcus Hale stood on the bridge of a captured Krixari dropship, now burning its way through the lower decks. Blood, both human and alien, coated his face. A captured energy lance felt unnaturally light in his hands as he fired precise bursts into retreating Krixari warriors. Beside him, Lena Reyes moved like a woman possessed, her eyes blazing with years of suppressed rage. "Engineering section," Marcus shouted over the comms. "Take the jump drive controls, do not let them escape." The boarding party surged forward through smoke-filled corridors. Krixari defenders fought desperately in the tight hallways, their exosuits powerful but clumsy at close range. A warrior lunged at Lena with a glowing energy blade. She ducked under the swing, drove a combat knife up under its mandible, and twisted viciously. The alien collapsed in a spray of ichor. Keep pushing, she yelled, voice hoarse. For every city they burned, for every person they took. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out in brutal, close-quarters ferocity. Humans who had spent years surviving on scraps now wielded alien weapons with deadly effect. They moved in fire teams, using tactics refined in the bloody preserve. What the Krixari had intended as sport had forged humanity into something terrifyingly efficient. In orbit, a Krixari heavy cruiser named Dominion's Fist suddenly went silent on comms. 30 seconds later, its massive cannons pivoted and unleashed devastating broadsides into 2 neighboring ships. Human boarders had taken the bridge. Zoreth watched the destruction with 6 wide, horrified eyes. The nobility who had come for entertainment were now crammed into escape pods, screaming for launch priority. Their once arrogant chittering had dissolved into desperate pleas for mercy. There will be none, Marcus growled as if reading their thoughts. A priority transmission suddenly forced its way through every channel, overriding Krixari encryption with stolen codes. Marcus Hale's face appeared on the main holodisplay, dirty, bloodied, but radiating raw triumph. "You came to hunt us," he said, his voice steady and ice-cold. "You gave us the perfect arena, continent-sized training grounds, live targets to study, weapons and ships delivered right to our feet. Thank you." Zoreth slammed his fist down, cutting the feed with a snarl. "All ships, emergency retreat, jump to hyperspace immediately, disengage from the planet." Too late. Human teams had already reached critical systems on the largest vessels. The Vexarath shuddered violently as internal explosions ripped through its engineering decks. Jump drive capacitors overloaded in brilliant blue arcs. Navigation systems went dark. "Jump drive compromised," Visk screamed. "They planted charges during the boarding, we can't jump." Zoreth staggered as another explosion rocked the ship. Bulkheads groaned. Lights flickered. Through the viewport, he watched his once invincible armada burning. Human-piloted Krixari fighters danced through the debris field, picking off escape pods with clinical precision. What had begun as humans running for their lives had transformed into the greatest counter-invasion in galactic history in mere hours. On the surface, far below, the massive preserve was now a graveyard of alien war machines. Twisted hunter drones lay smoking among the trees. The Harvester's colossal corpse smoldered where it had finally been brought down by coordinated human strikes. Captured dropships lifted off in waves, carrying fresh fighters into the orbital battle. Lena stood atop a ruined Krixari command vehicle, firing her energy lance at the last pockets of ground resistance. She glanced up at the sky, watching streaks of fire as alien ships fell burning through the atmosphere. "We're winning," she whispered, almost unable to believe it. Marcus joined her, breathing heavily. "This is just the beginning. They'll come back with bigger fleets, more scared, more desperate." Lena's smile was sharp and dangerous. "Good, let them come. We learned how to run. Now we're learning how to hunt." Aboard the dying Vexarath, Captain Zoreth barricaded himself on the command deck with the few remaining guards. The sounds of human boarders clearing section after section grew closer, methodical, unrelenting, terrifying in their discipline. For the first time in the long history of the Krixari Dominion, the Predator understood true fear. The humans had stopped running. And now the galaxy itself would learn to run from them. The Vexarath was dying. Bulkheads groaned and twisted under relentless internal explosions. Smoke poured through shattered corridors like the breath of some vengeful beast. Emergency lighting flickered blood-red, casting long, nightmarish shadows across the walls. The once proud flagship of the invasion fleet was now a tomb echoing with the sounds of war. Captain Zoreth stumbled through the chaos, his once impeccable chitin armor cracked and leaking pale ichor. Royal guards lay dead behind him, their bodies torn apart by precise bursts of captured energy fire. The clicking of his mandibles had turned into a terrified stutter. "They're coming," he hissed to himself. "How can they be this fast?" From the decks below rose the terrifyingly disciplined shouts of human boarders. No panicked screams, no wasteful celebration, just cold. Methodical clearing, room by room, section by section. Humanity had learned the art of war from the very species that tried to exterminate them. On the bridge of a captured Crixari cruiser now orbiting Earth, Sergeant Marcus Hale stood tall despite his wounds. Blood streaked his face. His arm was crudely bandaged where acid had burned him. Lena Reyes stood at his side, eyes fierce and unyielding as they monitored the final assault on the Vexarath. "Command deck team, status." Marcus spoke into the alien comm system they had already mastered. A crackling voice replied, "We're 2 sections out. They're barricaded in. No surrender." Lena's lips curled into a grim smile. "Good. Let them feel what it's like to be hunted." Back on the Vexarath, Zoreth reached the heavily reinforced command deck doors just as the first explosive charges rocked the corridor behind him. He sealed the blast doors with trembling claws and staggered toward the emergency escape pod bay. "You watched us like animals," he whispered bitterly, the words tasting like ash. "You laughed as you released us into your preserve, and now—" A thunderous boom shook the entire ship. The blast doors buckled. Human voices, calm, professional, deadly, echoed through the gap. "Breaching." Zoreth dove into the nearest escape pod, slamming the hatch shut. His 6 eyes darted wildly as he initiated launch sequence. The pod tore away from the dying flagship with violent force, flinging him into the void. Through the small viewport, he witnessed the full horror of his fleet's annihilation. Hundreds of Crixari warships burned in silent orbit, trailing fire as they fell toward Earth's atmosphere. Human-piloted fighters danced between them with impossible skill, using tactics the Crixari had never encountered. What began as desperate running had evolved into masterful hunting in less than a single planetary rotation. On the surface, far below, Marcus and Lena stood on the observation deck the Crixari had once used to watch their sport. The massive holographic displays were now under human control. The vast preserve that was meant to be humanity's graveyard lay quiet except for distant victory cheers rising from thousands of freed survivors. Lena leaned against the railing, exhausted but radiant. "We actually did it. Billions were slaughtered, but we turned their own game against them." Marcus stared up at the burning sky. His voice was quiet but carried steel. "This wasn't luck. They gave us the perfect classroom, a continent-sized arena, live targets, advanced technology delivered straight into our hands. They thought they were teaching us fear." He shook his head. "They taught us how to win." A priority channel opened. The human teams aboard the Vexarath had finally breached the command deck. "Bridge secure," the team leader reported. "No survivors. We have full fleet command codes." Marcus nodded. "Broadcast it, all channels, Galactic Standard. Make sure every Crixari world hears this." The transmission went live across the Dominion's remaining relay stations, spreading like wildfire through conquered systems. On every screen in every conquered city, the image of Marcus Hale appeared, bloodied, dirty, yet standing like a conqueror. Behind him, the burning wreckage of the Crixari flagship drifted silently. "You came to hunt us," Marcus said, his voice calm yet carrying the weight of billions of dead. "You rounded us up. You put us in your preserve. You watched from your safe ships as we started running. You laughed. You placed bets. You called us primitive biomass." He leaned closer to the camera. "Look closer now." The feed cut to footage compiled from the battle, humans tearing apart hunter drones with improvised weapons. Humans bringing down the harvester through sheer will and coordination. Humans piloting stolen Crixari ships with deadly precision. The final moments of the Vexarath as it burned. "You gave us the arena," Marcus continued. "We used it. Every kilometer we ran taught us your weaknesses. Every beast you sent taught us how to kill. Every ship you landed became ours. You wanted sport. Congratulations. You got the greatest hunt in galactic history." Lena stepped into frame beside him, her voice sharp as a blade. "Tell the rest of your Dominion this. Humanity is no one's prey. We run farther. We hit harder. And next time you come for us, you won't even see us coming." The broadcast ended with a final image. the human flag raised over the ruins of the Krixari Command Center. In his tiny escape pod, drifting helplessly through the darkness of space, Captain Zorath curled into a fetal position. The pod's life support hummed softly, but he felt only crushing silence. No rescue fleet would come, not after this. He replayed the human transmission again and again, mandibles clicking in pure dread. These were not the broken primitives he had expected. These were something far more dangerous, a species that turned predation into evolution, a species that weaponized desperation itself. The Krixari had not hunted humanity. Humanity had studied them, adapted to them, and then hunted them with terrifying efficiency. As his pod drifted further into the black, a final chilling realization settled over Zorath like ice. This was only the beginning. Humanity was awake now, united, armed with stolen alien technology and the burning memory of near extinction. They would rebuild. They would spread. And one day, the Krixari Dominion and every empire that had ever looked at humanity as easy prey would learn what it truly meant to run. Back on Earth, Marcus looked out at the stars. "They'll come again," he said quietly to Lena. "Bigger, meaner, more terrified." Lena loaded a fresh power cell into her captured energy lance, her eyes gleaming with unbreakable resolve. "Let them come." She smiled a predator's smile. "We'll be ready." Subscribe.